financial resources in order for the economy to work. They try to increase competition and specialization of regions, and of course they create a large economy of scale. There is an equalitarian right of investment, purchase, or buying shares from any countries in Europe. That means for you or any American person or American business that once they get to Europe in one country, they get the opening of that whole market. All the intra-euro transfer is in euro, even for those countries that are not adopting the euro as a currency. What I mean is that euro is considered as a domestic payment, like any debit or credit card charging or ATM withdrawal. You won't have a foreign charge if you pay something and you come from one euro country to another euro country. The service accounts, all the service account for about 60 to 70% of the GDP of the European Union. And a self-employed person or a small business is allowed to move and exercise in any member states once it's established in one of them. Now, this is very nice. You have this huge market. Now, for a small business, it does matter, but what really matters is about this, the regions. What happens is that a small business that gets into Europe has to choose one region where he wants to begin with. And the different regions propose different attraction for foreign companies. We have a representative of IDA, which is an Irish group who represents regions in Ireland, and they will probably talk about it. And if you ask a Dutch person, he will provide you whatever the Netherlands have to offer. But in overall, what I'm trying to show you here is that you can choose the regions where you want to go according to your business need, and then you have access to these whole markets. Now, there are some partnerships between different actors at the regional level, and that includes universities, business sectors. There are also collaboration between a university, for example, in Ireland and small business in the Netherlands with some investment from France. So that's something which is really possible in Europe thanks to that new market. Now, the billion-dollar question, the euro. Because this is usually what people hear about when hearing about Europe, about the euro. So the euro has been adopted in 17 countries out of those 27, but all except two, which are Denmark and the United Kingdom, are bound to join the euro at certain points. And that's for them to meet what is called the convergence criteria. And I believe that Mr. Babel has going to talk better than I can because he has been working on that for a few years. And what happened is that only 17 of the 27 countries currently in the European Union have met those criteria, except Denmark and UK. But the euro still is the main currency, the day-to-day currency for over 300 million people. And it's the second largest reserve currency and the second largest, most traded currency in the world, after the US dollar, of course. Now, the monetary crisis or the euro crisis, which is about the sovereign debts, has been created because some euro countries have today some hardship to refinance their governmental debt because they have huge debts, and the treaties of Maastricht has limited their ability to take loans and to be in deficit spending. seen as a threat, but it can be also seen as the trigger for more integration and more power from the EU institutions. Now, in those last years, Europe has been working on the next step, because a lot of initiatives in Europe have been ending in 2013, 2014. The next big step is what is called Europe 2020. And Europe 2020, which has been really released those last months, created 5 objectives to be reached. So they did create what is called the Small Business Act, which is a bunch of legislation rules in order to make it easier and more affordable for small business to exist. The digital agenda and the Innovation Union are working on increasing innovation in Europe. There is, of course, work about education, and there has been a recognition overall Europe on diploma between the different countries. And they're working on other things like climate, energy issues. Another initiative that is pretty recent is the Single Market Act. And there has been the Single Market Act 1 and Single Market Act 2. I won't get into the details, but these are 27 initiatives, and I picked up a few which I believe are the most relevant. Intellectual property rights. We are talking here about the Euro patents. You patent in one country, and then your patent is recognized in 27. And this is pretty important for the IP law. Digital single markets. We are talking about increasing globally the infrastructure, IT infrastructure in Europe. They already removed part of the barriers that existed, for example, in the telecom companies. The taxation unification. This is a pretty controversial topic, and I won't get into details because it's very technical and I'm not an expert in that. But we are talking, in addition to a custom union and integrated VAT, about more unification on the tax laws. The European Corporation Law, which is about creating an entity, which is called the European entity, which will be recognized in all the European Union. So the same way you go in Delaware and you can do business anywhere in Europe, and you are recognized, your company is recognized in the whole US are, then in Europe you would go incorporate in whatever region, whatever country you want, and your corporation will be recognized or could be replicated without any need to recreate another company anywhere in the EU. Access to finance makes it easier for you in one country to get finance from another region from Europe. And there are a lot of other laws. I don't want to really get into that at that point. On the international scene, as I said, the US is one of the major partners of the European Union. And there has been some warm time and some cold times between Europe and the US with different treaties. The treaties that exist between the US and the EU are pretty old. They exist for a few years. The years 2010 2013 has been a little bit more milder in terms of cooperation, but now there is a renewal, especially with, in February, new initiatives of that US-EU free trade agreement, which is called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And we are talking here about a 2.7 billion worth trade flow and an increase, a possible increase of 10 to 20% on trade between Europe and the US globally. Now, I don't know if we already have numbers, but this will probably affect and can affect the Bay Area economy as well. And we are talking here, as I said before, about job creations. Now, why does it matter to me, and why is EUROPORT important? Because EUROPORT, which is today a non-for-profit organization, is really bridging between Europe and the Bay Area. We are located in the Bay Area. We are partnering with different consulates, trade offices find some partners after you have defined that global strategy that you want to do. You can try to set to Europe, and you have to really physically go there probably. As a person, you can travel, or as a business and try to settle there. You can contact us in order to do that. Now, if you have any questions.
Access both a customer base and financiers in EUROPORT through EUROPORT?
Okay, so first of all, that's something also that can probably be answered later on the panel. But in general, so we have